of all of our fellow citizens, so help us God. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Would the clerk please call the roll?
Alderman O'Brien.
Present.
Alderman Sullivan. Alderman Clee. Alderman Moran.
Present.
Alderman Lopez. Alderman Jettie.
Here.
Alderman Clemmons. Alderwoman Kelly. Alderman Camo is here. Alderman Dowd.
Present.
Alderman Gavea.
Here.
Alderman Karen. Alderman Tebow.
Here.
Alderwoman Timmons.
Here.
Alderman Wilshire.
Here.
You have 9 in attendance.
Thank you. Tonight's meeting is a public hearing and on a petition, L. Land Deerwood Drive, Lot H103. I'm going to turn the meeting over to the Chair of the Infrastructure Committee, Alderman O'Brien.
Thank you, Madam President. And to the general public that is here that's going to give us testimony, there will be no clock. We really want to hear what you people want to say on this particular item. I will call, as our tradition, testimony in favor. After everybody has spoken who wants to speak in favor of it, I will then terminate the testimony in favor and then open up testimony in opposition. I will then repeat to go to testimony in favor and again repeat to testimony in opposition. The second time, if you hear something from one of the ones and you want to make earth-shattering, designation, but please try not to repeat of what you said before, but keep in mind, this is your opportunity to educate us, members of the board who will be making the decision. So, and then my last thing is those that will come up to speak, please identify yourself with your name and your address, and so that could be recorded on the in the minutes. Okay, I will now open up the testimony in favor to petition L. Deerwood Drive, Lot H-103. Is there an attorney representing this? Do you want to go first so you can make your presentation?
Thank you. Daniel Muller from Cronin, Bisson, Zielinski on behalf of Vivian Jean Adams, the owner of the property in question. We are here after sort of a long journey back in September 2021. My client obtained a frontage variance to allow the construction of a single-family home on this lot on Deerwood Drive. We are here tonight because there is a state statute, 674-41, which basically says that if you're the street granting access to your lot, the street that you have frontage on, is not class 5 or better and doesn't fit into various other categories, you need to get relief from this board to allow for the issuance of a building permit for that lot and that lot alone. The street here is a class 6 street. What that means, it's a public way. However, it has not been maintained by the municipality, and there is generally no obligation, as it stands right now, for the municipality to maintain it. One of the things that the statute requires, because that is the case, if you are to grant relief, my client or whoever owns the property, when they go to get a building permit, as a prerequisite to gain that building permit, has to file in the Hillsborough County Registry of Deeds an agreement and release that basically acknowledges that the municipality has no liability, no responsibility for the street. The responsibility lies with the private homeowner, and they're going to have to do that. There has been a document, I have spoken to Attorney Leonard, from the Office of Corporation Counsel that we've been going back and forth. I think that is almost there. As I said, though, that would be a prerequisite to any building permit, because the question has come up before, is there any liability or is there any financial responsibility on the part of the city? The answer is no. Once again, to make the access work, that is responsibility of whoever owns the land, and that agreement reflects that. That being said, also to be clear, this proposal has been vetted a couple of times now through some of the city departments, in particular the fire department and public works department. The fire department had some requirements, including making sure that the width of any passable or usable road would be at least 20 feet to satisfy the state fire code. We're going to agree to comply with any and all of their requirements. I will say some of the requirements are sort of still up in the air. By way of further explanation, if the person who builds the house decides to put sprinklers in, certain requirements will apply, others will not apply. If they do not put sprinklers in, there will be more requirements that have to be met. So that's something that would come down the road, but the notion here is it's been to the fire department twice, once prior to the variance and once while this petition was pending, and they have made comments. Likewise with the Public Works Department, they have had a number of comments. The notion from our standpoint, unfortunately our engineer could not be here tonight to address some of the technical points, but the notion would be that we would agree that we'd have to provide a road plan that meets their requirements. There is a road plan that was included in the package. They have some comments and want some additional details. We would agree that a plan acceptable to them would go in as a condition of any approval from this board under this statute. So at the end of the day, we would meet the requirements of both the Public Works Department and the Fire Department in terms of the technical requirements of the road. I would note that some of the requirements here, for example, there is a request for no parking in this area. As I indicated earlier, Class 6 road is a public way, and I believe in the law of the state, this board, if there was any question about whether there would be parking allowed, would still have the jurisdiction to regulate the use of the road, including parking thereon. Turning to the proposal itself, we're looking for basically the right to get a permit to build one single-family home on an existing lot of record. Ms. Adams has had this property since 2002, has been paying taxes on it, and at this point would like to be able to get something out of the carrying costs that she's borne over the years for this lot. The proposal would have access come from the, I'll call it the Class 6 portion of Massasoit, which is the end of that right-of-way. That right-of-way was dedicated to public use through the recording of Plan 2103. Then we'll go up Deerwood Drive to the property. As I said, the details are on the plan, and they will be further modified to meet the city's concerns. One of the issues, I saw a letter from the Airport Authority. They raised some concerns relative to what I'll call an access road that in part abuts this property. The access road is within a public way. Public rights still exist. You can't adversely possess against public rights. So to the extent that they'd have a concern about people using that road, I think the suggested course of action would just seek to discontinue or partially discontinue another portion of Deerwood Drive. This board has discontinued portions of Deerwood Drive. More specifically, if you go further up, beyond the North Fork of Blood Crossing Road, which was another Class 6, there was a portion up there that is shown on several plans as having been discontinued by the 1980s. I'm not sure the exact date, but it was by the mid-1980s of Deerwood Drive. That would end the public servitude over that portion of the road, clear that up. Likewise, if there was a concern about getting access to that road, either from my client's property or something like that, there is an opportunity for them. They can speak to them. The general law in the state is each owner owns the center line of the road. They could speak to my client or whoever owns the property at the time about getting an easement for a fence or something of that nature, or could seek to just purchase that half of the road. There are options available to them. Likewise, to the extent that they have an interest in the property, my understanding a question had been put to the airport approximately 5 years ago. At the time, they did not have an interest. If they have an interest now, they are free to come and ask about buying it. I don't think my client has any particular objection to anyone coming in and putting an offer to purchase the property or to inquire about it. So with respect to their concerns, there are practical ways of dealing with it, but number two, I don't think that the fact that they would like to buy the property is really grounds to deny relief here. Without this relief, there is basically no reasonable use left of this property. Can't put a building permit, can't get a building permit. It basically stays or has to stay as empty property, which, you know, the notion in the state is everyone has a right, constitutional right, to use and enjoy their property, and that is what we're looking to do here. Again, the proposal is rather modest. We're looking for permission for a single-family home. The last thing I would note, when we went to the planning board and got their favorable recommendation, the Conservation Commission brought up some concerns about effects on conservation restrictions on neighboring properties. Obviously, the city has setbacks that keep development from immediately going next to those properties. However, we would be willing to discuss with them what I will call an additional setback, if that's what's needed around those sides of the property to further protect the conservation restrictions so that they don't need to worry about the same. I think in a nutshell, that is sort of what we have to say. If the board has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Counselor, for your presentation. I'm going to ask that you hold off, and to members of the board, to hold off particular questions for now. Keep in mind the flavor of the meeting is supposed to allow the citizens, so we'll continue with the testimony in favor and in opposition. But immediately following, after we convene this meeting, we're going into the Committee of Infrastructure meeting. Well, this will be discussed by that particular board. And we'd like to have you join us for that meeting if you can do so.
I will. Thank you.
And then I think members of the board will have questions at that time.
Okay.
Thank you, Counselor. Thank you. All right, we're still on testimony in favor. Anybody else would like to stand? Yes, please come to the mic.
Hi, my name is Frank Goodspeed. I'm 120 Walnut Street, and I'm a Nashua native. I've lived there all my life. And thank you guys for doing what you do. I appreciate it. Everybody can hear me okay, all right? Jean Adams, the person who owns this property, she's owned it for 30 years. She's 80 years old. It's a beautiful area. If you know the area at all, you're going down Indian Rock Road. You get to Blackfoot, which takes off to, you get some beautiful houses out there. You're ranging from 600,000 to like $1 million something. When we looked at this, she asked me, what can we do with this parcel? I've dealt with real estate for over 40 years, off and on. And I said, gee, you got just under 4 acres of land, 3.7 acres of land in Nashua, right? And down in that area. The long and short of it is after we met with the engineer, he said, listen, you don't want to change the character of the neighborhood, which we're not doing. I think we're gonna enhance it with putting one house there. And the other issue was, he said, well, your butts 150 acres. To me, that's a great piece. Abutting 150 acres, your view was of conservation land. I think one of the issues that people confuse here is that to get to this, everybody thinks it's conservation land. Her piece is conservation land because they've been walking by it all these years, enjoying the views and so forth. And there's some confusion there. It's her land. It's her land. And there was other mention that it was wetland. There's no wetlands here. The engineer, and by the way, he's had a family emergency. He couldn't be here this evening. But we did that right at the beginning to see if there was any wetlands on this piece. There's no wetlands on it at all. So again, you had the ex-Attorney General of the United States of America who lived down the road. We're not trying to change the character of the neighborhood. One house lot. That's all I wanted to say. That's why I'm in favor of it, okay? Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Again, I'll call for any testimony in favor. Going once, twice, sold America. Okay, I will now terminate testimony in favor and open up testimony in opposition. If somebody wants to speak in opposition, this is your opportunity to come forward.
Hello, thank you for having me. My name is Holly Hart. I live at 17 Massasoit Road, Nashua. I am the abutter to this property. I did present a letter to each one of you. I don't know if any of these subjects are going to be addressed tonight. I hope that they are. But first of all, what I do want to address are these 2 certified letters that were addressed to my husband. I went to pick them up and I could not because he is deceased and I couldn't get his signature. And I was told that the reason they were addressed to my husband is because the notifications get sent out by the assessor's card. So in doing a little bit of research, it didn't make sense to me. And I searched the GIS records and everything, and my name is on that. But I checked on the assessor's record, and my husband's name is still on that too. So if you do a search in Google, it brings you right to the GIS. And basically it tells you on the GIS, use the interactive tool to zoom in, zoom out, pan, measure, and find abutters, etc. So I would think that this is how you would go about notifying an abutter instead of the assessor's record card. My second concern is that if this project is done, you're going to open up Massasoit Road down to Deerwood. Are those boulders going to be removed? My concern is this is going to turn into an access road right over to Amherst Street. You don't know how many people come down there thinking from their GPS that this is Deerwood. So they wanted to go around the other way. So there's going to be a lot of people going through that access way. And the third thing that does concern me is the rite of passage. Who can use that road? Can the public use that road? Can the public drive down that road? Can the public walk down that road? There was much concern at the zoning board that the no parking signs and the nobody can be using it because it's going to be a private driveway. So it's just, everything is just so up in the air and there's not a lot of answers to the questions. So hopefully tonight I can get some answers and also my neighbors can get some answers too. Thank you.
Ms. Hart, before you go, I'm sorry you had some difficulty. Are you familiar with the City of Nashua's website through the assessing department? And you can bring up the municipal GIS portion of it.
I'm familiar with the GIS,
Okay,
yes.
which would list yourself as an abutter to the
I am
particular-
listed on the GIS, but not on, if you click on the assessor's link, my husband's name is still on that.
Okay, I hope you, and I'm sure they'll
Hopefully
work
it will
with you.
catch up.
Yeah.
Hopefully it will catch up.
Yeah.
But for future, perhaps maybe using this instead of the other, because it seems like the assessor's card is not catching up with the GIS.
They're usually very good people, but I'm sure if you talk to the assessors, this sounds like a, a solution is in hand, so, yeah.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, open up for testimony in opposition.
Good evening, Chris Lynch, 500 Main Dunstable Road. Also, excuse me, the airport manager, speaking in opposition of this project. I sent a letter out to the Board of Aldermen, and it states that we have serious security and safety concerns if we were to open up this road. Essentially, this road is out in the woods, out in the middle of nowhere, and it abuts our property. We are not the city of Nashua. We leased this property from the city of Nashua. So I wasn't even notified, as Ms. Hart wasn't notified as an abutter. I get it, we don't own the property, the city does. She let me know this was all going on. And, immediate concerns are security, people getting through the fence out back. We can't patrol the fenced-in area out in the woods all the time. And then we have some critical infrastructure out there in terms of navigation equipment. We have a precision approach that goes to runway 14, and the part of the components of that system go right across the road on Deerwood. And I know that the attorney spoke a few minutes ago about a portion of the road a little further down where it is actually discontinued, and that's where all of our equipment is. But there's nothing that would prevent anybody from continuing beyond Miss Adams' property and venturing down into our critical ILS approach infrastructure. So those are some of our biggest concerns, and I know that there was discussions about no parking, et cetera, at the zoning meeting. People loitering there at night. Again, we can't patrol that area constantly, and it is an airport. We have serious, security concerns. On another note, one of the things I'm tasked with is protecting the airport environment, and we strongly discourage, the FAA discourages it, the DOT discourages it, building residential properties abutting an airport. It's never a good thing. I actually went online the other day and just type that in, and you will have hundreds of pages of different cities and towns that have been through this, and they all realize the same thing. It's not a good thing. Airports, we're zoned airport industrial. We're not a residential neighborhood, residential property. We generate a lot of noise, and some people would say it's constant noise. There's air traffic, and where this property is, it's located right within the air traffic pattern, so they'll be subject to that constant noise. Some of the board of directors asked that, I let everybody know that, and that this should be disclosed to any potential buyers of that property. And as an example, excuse me, on the other end of the airport on Pine Hill Road, we're actually engaged in an agreement right now to purchase a piece of land on Pine Hill Road because somebody bought it and they planned on developing a single-family home on it. And it directly abuts the airport. And after a few meetings with the developer, he agreed. It's not a good place for a home, and we've agreed to buy it, and we're negotiating that right now. If I could negotiate to purchase this property from Miss Adams, we would. I'm not in a position to do that right now. We're carrying too many projects right now at the airport. But in the letter I sent out, I would urge the city of Nashua, who actually owns the property, the airport property, to consider acquiring that piece of property. And I'll cut it short. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lynch. Again, I'll open up. We're in testimony in opposition. Anybody else would like to come forward?
Hi, my name is Alan Doucette. I'm at 12 Massasoit Road, and I'm only going to keep it short, but I'm here to support both Mr. Abbott and Ms. Hart in their concerns, and things just don't seem to make sense, especially with the items that have been brought up. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, sir. Brevity is always the best. Thank you. Again, we're in testimony in opposition. Anybody else would like to come forward?
Hi, good evening. My name is Julie Stanton. I am a neighbor of Holly at 15 Massasoit Road. I actually wasn't planning on speaking today, but just listening to the testimony by Mrs. Adams' representative, I'm just a little puzzled actually about how we all got here this far. In the initial hearings that we had with the zoning board, I was very surprised that this had continued with it being I guess not on conservation land, but abutting conservation land. Additionally, I purchased my home in 2005, just 3 years after Ms. Adams did. I purchased that home under the assumption that there would be no more buildings built. And I'm very surprised, again, that we're here at this stage of the game. Again, you know, like they mentioned that the engineer wasn't here. I don't see any visuals. I haven't seen any visuals about this. I don't know. I'm very unclear of what actually is going to happen, what's going to be built, where actually it is. And I just live, you know, 2 houses up. This is a beautiful neighborhood. I understand the want to build here, but is it best for the neighborhood? Is it best for the community? I don't think so. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Again, we're in testimony for opposition. Anybody would like to come forward? Seeing no one, I will close the testimony in opposition. I will now, very shortly, open up testimony in favor. I will allow you to speak again, but please refrain it to something that is earth-shattering or will help us make the decision. You all were very eloquent in your first presentation, so I think we get the gist. So, enough said. I will say testimony in favor. Anybody would like to come forward? Counselor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will keep it brief. The only thing I'm going to actually sort of speak to is there's this concern about precedent in the area. If you take a look at the GIS map, there is actually very little opportunity for further development in this area. Most of the lots in this area are subject to conservation restrictions. And the conservation restriction, because there was just for an explanation for some of the audience who brought it up, it's basically an easement or a covenant that goes on a piece of property to make sure that it isn't developed. And a lot of those in the area are like that. In terms of going up and down, my memory looking at the GIS, and I'm hoping it is accurate. As I said, if you go north, you're going to hit the airport access road. I actually understand right now that there are cement blocks that sort of block the road going north to where it's discontinued. To the south, there really isn't that much in the way of land that would be developable. There's a odd triangular piece south of the intersection with Massasoit, and I believe that, at least on the GIS, it shows the road ending along that area. So we're talking, again, about a very limited opportunity for development in this area, just because you have this one over 3 acre lot. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Okay, again, open up for testimony in favor. Seeing none, I will close the testimony in favor and reopen up in testimony in opposition. Seeing none, I will close the testimony in opposition. At this particular time, I will now close the public hearing on the petition at 7:31. Alderman Como, do you have a motion for me?
I would move to adjourn the public hearing at 7:31.
Okay, we have a motion to adjourn. I would like to, before we take a vote on that, I would like to invite the public. You are welcomed. We're going to go right into the infrastructure meeting. All are welcome to stay with us. Okay. So with that being said, all those in favor for adjournment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourned at 7:31. Thank you, Madam President.
You're welcome. Good night.
Okay, I will now call to order the Committee of Infrastructure, this date being June 28, 2023. The Committee of Infrastructure meeting is held this Wednesday, June 28, 2023, at 7:32 p.m. in the Automatic Chamber. I didn't see the bus let out, so I think everybody's here, but please call the roll.
Alderman Jettie?
Here.
Alderman Govea?
Here.
Alderman Camo is here. Alderman Dowd?
Here.
Alderman O'Brien?
Present.
You have 5 in attendance. And also, we have Alderwoman Timmons, Alderman Tebow, and Alderman Moran.
Okay. And I welcome my fellow aldermen for staying. Thank you. Okay, also in attendance, we do have Matt Sullivan from Community Development with us. So he will be available if need to later when we get into some of the nuts and bolts for some questions. Okay, public comment. To the public, this is the opportunity. If you had something that's being brought up before the board, you did express in the testimony in favor and opposition. So, you know, unless there's something, again, earth-shattering, please come forward. But I'll open up for public comment. There is a 3-minute time limit on this. Seeing none, I will close the testimony for, the portion for public comment. Communications.
Communication's been received from Sam Durfee, Planning Director, regarding referral from the Board of Aldermen on proposed petition for L Deerwood Drive, Lot H, Sheet 103. And communication has been received from Holly Hart regarding L Deerwood Drive.
There being no objection, I will accept the communications and place them on file.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can I please suggest that we move the discussion of the petition to above the other discussion we were supposed to have tonight?
Any objection? Without objection from a member of the boards, and I think that is common sense. We do have people here, and although what we do is very, very important, but we'll let them get out of here. Okay. All right. Very good. Without objection, so ordered.
And Mr. Chairman, if I may, we've also received a communication that was received after the agenda was prepared from Chris Lynch, Nashua Airport Manager, regarding the Nashua Airport Authority vehemently opposing proposed single-family home.
Okay. With being no objection, I'll accept the communication and place it on file. New business resolutions, we'll go right into 23-130. Could the clerk please, no, excuse me.
Petition.
Yeah. Yes, please, you got it. All right, there you go.
So before us is the petition for L Deerwood Drive, Lot H, 103.
Okay, I will open up the discussion on that. Mr. Sullivan, would you like to join us in the horseshoe, if you so wish? Mr. Cummings, you want to join too? I see you poking up over the dais, so I don't know.
I am completely content.
I'll save this.
What's that? No, I don't think so, yeah. Okay, without objections, we're going to open up the general discussion by members of the board on this. I would ask, can we have committee members so speak first? And then, of course, we definitely want to hear from all the members of the board. But there's seeing no pending motion, or, yes, there is, okay, there we go. Okay, for the point of opening up discussion, any members of the committee, Ms. Alderman Gaveva, do you want to, or Alderman Dow, would you like to open up the discussion?
Yeah, just for clarification on the record, I was on the Airport Authority for 15 years and was chairman. And I see a lot of unanswered questions relative to this particular property. One especially is that I don't see anywhere where the FAA has been queried about this. But I have some concerns, much like the airport, relative to this property that I think need to be resolved before a final action can be taken. But I'll reserve that and see where we go.
Okay, and I think the members of the committee and non-members of the committee would have questions. So without objection, I'll extend the invitation to the counselor if you want to come up and take a seat and just take one of the seats. Welcome to the big game. Here we go. Yeah, that way it would make it easier if some of the members do have some questions for you. Okay, thank you, Alderman Dowd. Alderman Gavea, did you have any comments?
I will withhold till my other alderman can speak first.
Okay, Alderman Jettie.
Yeah, thank you. So I have questions about, I see that there's nobody here from the Corporation Counsel's office, but maybe Director Sullivan is able to answer these questions. So I have concerns about the allegation of lack of notice and whether whether we have any kind of a procedural issue with the the lack of notice alleged by Ms. Hart and also the Airport Authority and also under we're here under 674:41. What exactly is our role? My understanding is that since the planning board has approved this, our authority is very limited, and I don't know if I'm correct about that. Whether we have any right to, if Corporation Counsel says that the steps have been followed and they're willing to, the statute provides, as Attorney Mueller explained, the statute provides that they have to agree to certain things. It has to be recorded with the registry. As long as they do all of that, is there anything left for us to do we have any, if we chose to, do we have any grounds to reject this?
Director Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To Alderman Jettie, Matt Sullivan, Community Development Director, for the record. To address the notification question first, it's an interesting one, Alderman Jettie. In fact, and I expect I might steal the floor from Attorney Mueller to my left on this question, actually, and that is that the statute does not require a butter notification in any way, shape, or form for an application under RSA 674:41. Nor does the statute actually require a public hearing process, but what it does is it provides the municipality with the ability, in my opinion, and I'm not an attorney for the public record, it
It provides the municipality with the ability to outline certain procedures and policies and practices for considering and ultimately choosing to approve or deny applications for relief under RSA 674-41. To that end, the city of Nashua has historically, and there is some mixed history on this, in fact, has included a public hearing process as part of consideration under RSA 674-41, and has also treated these applications in almost the same manner that it does a discontinuance, albeit a completely different process. And to that end, it has customarily provided notification as part of that process. So assuming for the purposes of this discussion that both notification to abutters and ultimately a public hearing are customarily part of the city's process on this type of application or petition, I can say the notification processes were followed. Now, I've had an opportunity to speak with Ms. Hart via email, and I'm sympathetic to her concerns, particularly in light of the circumstances. And I think we do have a procedural issue with our GIS and the assessing data and the way that those two things work together. And I know it's, that seamless integration is something that Director Cummings and the folks in assessing are working diligently on. But I do believe that notification should have been provided to Ms. Hart, but that's not ultimately what the assessing card said. And as a result, although it's not satisfying, I think that we're compliant with the notification requirements under state statute, but ultimately she was not able to collect the notification appropriately. And so I'm very apologetic to her for this circumstance. But I believe we're compliant. I think we have the ability to proceed here. The processes were followed customarily as we have with these applications in the past. Relative to your second question, the statute absolutely does provide the governing body, this group, the full board, of course, not the committee itself, but provides the Board of Aldermen with the authority to, I believe the word is authorize within the statute, a building permit under the circumstances of 674-41. And so to that end, the full board absolutely has the ability to deny or approve or authorize or not authorize an application for a building permit under the provisions of the statute. Your last question, I believe, is assuming that an agreement is made to record a limit of liability and the associated mechanisms included therein, does the board have the authority to deny or reject or vote not to authorize? In my opinion, again, I'm not an attorney, but I've had some experience with this statute. The answer is absolutely yes. You are entitled to review standards such as access, construction of that access, the ability of certain fire suppression services, although there is a limit of liability. There are other considerations that can be made in the consideration of the statute in deciding whether or not to authorize the building permit. In some communities, they have actually memorialized these other criteria within a Class 6 road policy. Those exist in several locations around the state of New Hampshire. That's not the case in Nashua, and so the approach that we've taken is that we essentially put these petitions through a technical review process, which is a review by our engineering department, our fire department, and our planning department. Absent those Class 6 road criteria, we've used those three departments to vet or provide comment on the basic infrastructure availability, suitability of access, ability to provide fire suppression services. Those groups have traditionally weighed in, provided comments, and those comments have customarily been incorporated as conditions of any aldermanic approval or authorization of a building permit. And so I absolutely do think you have the authority to make additional requirements and to ultimately vote to either authorize or not authorize, provided that the criteria have or have not been met. I think that's a very long answer to your question, but I hope it covers each of the three questions that you asked.
Right, and I appreciate it. Could I follow up?
Follow up?
So you talked about there not being a requirement of providing notice for this meeting. What about the meeting where the planning board considered this? Is there any aren't abutters required to be notified of that meeting?
Not for their consideration of this type of petition. The petition is effectively treated as a referral from the Board of Aldermen, and the planning board process was itself not a public hearing. It was simply a consideration of the referral of the petition by the Board of Aldermen. And so those referral considerations are not treated as public hearings by the planning board, and as a result, although they meet the public notice requirements for the meeting, obviously, that we have to under state statute, there's not an abutter notification nor a public notification with the customary 10 days because it's not a public hearing at that level.
Okay, could I ask another question?
Follow up?
So when the planning board considered this, was it listed on their agenda? Was there public notice of the meeting, although it's, the public notice appears in the National Telegraph, and how many people read that, I don't,
Yeah.
I'm not sure anymore, so, whether effectively anybody gets notified of those things is a question, but it did appear in that notice?
It did.
That public notice?
Yes, it did.
Okay, and I have another question. So there was testimony about, when I looked at the GIS map for this, so on the GIS map, there's Deerwood Drive,
Can you bring up to?
and there's something called South Deerwood Drive. And, it looks like South Deerwood Drive, I'm not sure if it goes into Hollis or not. Does it end at Indian Rock Road? Is the only access to Ms. Adams' property via, Indian Rock and Massasoit? Oh, they're pulling it up now, so.
Yeah, Mr. Sullivan, we got it on
Okay.
the overhead.
To my knowledge, the sole access to this property is via Deerwood Drive via Massasoit.
Okay.
South Deerwood Drive does not connect, to my knowledge, to the south. Now, I've not conducted any detailed deed research or done that with the Partnership of Corporation Council, but I don't believe that connects to the south.
Okay, and then going, I assume, north to the, I assume this is oriented so that the top is north. So does Deerwood Drive, and I guess there's part of Deerwood Drive that comes from Amherst Street, and my memory is, I remember trying to bicycle
Yep.
south on Deerwood Drive and being stopped by, at the time, there was a police officer there who stopped me and said I couldn't go down Deerwood Drive. I couldn't access behind the runway. So is that closed off?
So, and Attorney Mueller had spoken to this. So the portion above the wishbone, if you will, there, is discontinued up to the north, if you want to scroll just a bit to the north. So from that wishbone there, up really to that point right there, there's no public road to my knowledge.
Okay.
And there's a gate right where the cursor is right there that now prohibits access into the airport proper. There's been a substantial effort over the recent decade to fence all areas of the airport, and that area is fully fenced in right there.
Okay.
Yeah, the fire department has access to it. And if it makes you feel better, North Fork of Blood's Crossing.
I'm not sure why that would make me feel better.
Well, that's the name of it.
So from Ms. Adams' property, is there a fence that keeps people from going north on Deerwood?
There is not a fence. Assuming that one walks the Massasoit right-of-way to the Deerwood right-of-way, so they walk down the end of Massasoit. Thank you, Vanna White, whoever's doing that. And
I gotta go, Clark.
they take the right there. That is not gated. There is, however, and Alderman Camo, if you wouldn't mind clicking the layers and then bringing up the imagery, we might be able to get a better sense of this. And then if you go to street map default, up at the top,
There.
parcel map with aerials. So Perimeter Road right there is behind a gated entrance that exists to the east. And so if one walks Massasoit Road to Deerwood Drive, they can theoretically bypass the gate. And I think this speaks to some level to the airport's concern about access to the approach and the approach lights. That if the access is upgraded, then someone could theoretically drive a car or another type of vehicle along Massasoit, along Deerwood, up to the airport approach lights. And it's important to point out that this area in front of Miss Adams' lot has been improved as a gravel road for the purposes of the airport's maintenance and access to its assets on the western side of the runway. And so the road is well built, albeit not by the municipality. And so theoretically, opening of the access of Massasoit and Deerwood could create security issues for the airport, but those issues could possibly be mitigated through a set of gates and other things, but that does not necessarily resolve the FAA concerns. I mean, it's a complicated situation here.
But if
Alderman Majority, may I remind you, we have other people at the meeting too.
right, and they'll have an opportunity when
Yeah, I will allow a follow-up, but
thank you. So, so the airport's concerns, could they not be answered by the airport providing security itself, with fences and gates, as you mentioned? Where is the approach to the runway? Isn't that much farther up? Doesn't the runway, that's the runway over there, right? These other things are.
So, Mr. Chair, if I may address this.
yes.
And I am certainly not the airport manager, and I fear Chris Lynch will be upset with me for trying to answer here. But I would say what can be addressed is fence and gating could be constructed that would effectively do or replicate the condition that exists today, which is restricting access to the airport approach lights. What I can't speak to is the airport on either end of the runway has a cone or trapezoid of approach zone in which there needs to be a level of clearance and removal of obstructions. I can't speak to whether or not this parcel impacts that cone or trapezoid. That's sort of the FAA component that I'm not comfortable with. But I can only say that security could be put in place, absolutely. That will be costly. It could be done. But this FAA concern is something that I simply can't speak to this evening. And I think we'd need to get clarification from that entity to understand whether there's actually a functional problem.
Okay. Is it possible to ask Mr. Lynch to comment?
Go ahead then, Mr. Jenny.
With your permission, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, you have it.
Mr. Lynch?
What can I tell you? So what Matt was alluding to, and I don't have the paperwork in front of me to give you all the dimensions, but there's what's called a runway, excuse me, I've been talking since 6 a.m. There's a runway protection zone, like he said, it's a trapezoid, and it extends out. Does it go all the way over to Miss Adams' property? I don't believe so. But one of the things that Matt was talking about is where the road is discontinued. That was discontinued, to the best of my knowledge, many years ago when they put those approach lights out there so that we wouldn't have traffic going through there. Fences and security, somebody had suggested, not tonight, but somebody said, well, what if you put fences all around the lights themselves? I can't do that. Everything out there has to be frangibly mounted, so if there ever were an accident, it just falls apart. If you went out to those approach lights and pushed on them with your hand, they would tip over. So I can't fence in the individual lights, but as Matt was saying, if you went in and put a gate across the road, it would be very costly for us if we were tasked with it. We'd have to bring electricity out there and a gate. I just did another gate, it was $40,000 for a gate inside the airport. So that could be done. But again, you know, my primary concern is restricting that access out there.
Okay. All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And, excuse me, I could get you specifics on the dimensions of all that. I'd call the engineering firm tomorrow, and I can forward that to Matt, so you can have that.
Okay. And Mr. Lynch, before you leave.
Sir.
Currently, from what I remember my days of working up at the airport fire station, Perimeter Road is one access point, and Deerwood Drive off of Amherst Street, closer to Amherst Street, that's the only two access points to that whole area.
Correct. There is another one that's further out. If you take the paved access road, if you were coming up to the railroad tracks,
Yeah,
Deerwood up to the tracks, take a left on that paved road,
yeah,
go all the way down there. It's probably, I don't know, a good mile, right by the AutoJean Packaging Company. We have a gate there as well. That's not a powered gate. It's not used unless there were a fire out there. And fire department has keyed access to that.
yeah. And if a plane's in trouble, generally, they're designed to fly. But generally, they're critical mode, takeoff and landings. And there have been issues in the past where they have gone down in that area
Correct.
because of some form of failure that wasn't picked up by the pilot. Am I correct?
Yes, sir. You know, your greatest chances of failure are upon full power input and power reduction. So when you're landing and taking off, that's the most critical phase of flight.
Okay.
That road, that access road, the paved access road that goes out that parallels the railroad tracks, Penachuk came and got an easement, I think it was 2 years ago, and they had to put a connecting loop to Amherst Street, in case they had to shut down Amherst Street, and the fire department put in 5 fire hydrants, which came in handy, by the way. We had an arsonist out there that was lighting fires, and they lit a fire the size of a football field out there, right beside a hydrant, so it paid off real quick.
Thank you, Mr.
Okay,
Lynch.
thank you.
Alderman Dow.
All right, being the person responsible for a lot of that development, that perimeter road that you see on the bottom there, that was built when we extended some power lines out that way. The only gate that I'm aware of is almost where that blue box is on the far right-hand corner.
There is one there too,
They're
for
right
the
there.
FBO.
And I don't know if they put in a gate further down.
Yeah, please. Yeah, you have to use the, well,
So-
Yeah, you can
okay.
So,
borrow this. See that?
so I'll just give a summary. If I were the airport manager, I would attempt to buy this lot, and because it's completely surrounded by properties owned by the city that get acquired by the airport authority, then turned over to the city in the agreement with the state. In order to secure the equipment, you would have to run a gate from a fence from wherever that last gate is, all the way around the property to the other gate on Deerwood Drive, and you would have to do a further discontinuance if this lot were to be built upon. I would do a discontinuance from that point all the way across the airport, discontinue that road entirely. And I'm sure we have an alderman from Ward 1 that would sponsor that.
And I had suggested that in the letter. If we do build, we'll
Yeah,
have to.
so that cone that you were talking about does not extend over to that property.
I don't believe so.
It's a clear zone, and it goes out in a cone shape, and it's by height. So,
Correct.
when you're close to the airport, you can't have any trees or any buildings in that zone because it would interfere with the aircraft. My other concern is where that property is it's gonna be a lot of noise. I mean, as much as much as the people that build aircraft these days have made those aircraft less noisy, They still are very noisy, because when you go out to take off in the left to right direction up there, they sit at the end of the runway and they run their engines up full power so they can take off. Makes a lot of noise. I can hear them where I live, and I'm a few miles away. And I believe, last time I checked, we had somewhere in excess of 20 jet aircraft on the airport.
We have about a dozen based, and we have a few more coming. And we have a lot of
So-
transient jet traffic.
Now, most of them have the high bypass ratios, which make it less noisy, but some don't. And when they fire up, it's gonna be noisy. My concern would be, somebody builds there, you know, back when I was the chairman of the airport authority, every time somebody bought a house in the neighborhood, they complained about the airport noise. No, you have to know that you're building next to an airport and there's noise from the aircraft. My other concern is where the property's located. I would certainly want the FAA to tune in, because they're reactionary, they're not proactive. They may not even know about this, but they may want to contribute to buying that property. So I think that's necessary to check into. And that equipment, I can tell you, is very expensive. So it may be expensive to put a fence in, but it'd be a lot more expensive if you damage that ILS equipment. So I don't know whether the FAA would help with fencing, but you'd have to look into that. So there are a lot of unanswered questions about that lot before I'd feel comfortable, you know, saying you could build a house on it. And there's a lot of actions I think the city would need to take to protect itself before actual construction. So I still have a lot of questions.
All right, I think most of the members of the committee had spoke, so Alderman Tebow, thank you for your patience.
Sure, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, this is a tough one, right? So, you know, I can see both sides of this in a general sense. Obviously, if the board decides to vote this down, I'd hate to see Ms. Adams not have, I mean, she has a great property here, and it's worth something. So I would love to see something happen if the board rejects it, somewhere to help her with that. And then on the other side, obviously, you know, the neighbors would like to see it stay the same. So I'm on the planning board, and I sat in for Alderman Klee, who couldn't make it. You know, it's when you look at the paper for the planning board, the petition is down, and then you have the cases above it. And so I could see where it can kind of get lost. And I will tell you, that was the same night as the asphalt plant, if I remember correctly. And
What asphalt plant?
yeah, right. And so I think that really, you know, there was nobody that spoke against it at the planning board, because I don't think anyone knew. And so, you know, I hate to see it not be, you know, I'm glad there's people on both sides here tonight to speak on it. So when it does come to us, we can make a strong decision on it. The planning board looks at it, I mean, I thought Director Sullivan can correct me if I'm wrong, but we looked at it as based on our criteria for pushing things through, especially a petition, that by the letter of the law, it was good enough to pass to the Board of Aldermen. I did put a caveat on it, and I think maybe someone else did as well. I wanted to make sure that it was okay with the Conservation Commission. I thought that was at least part of it, that we had to at least make sure they were good with it, because they didn't know about it. And it seems like a lot of people didn't know about it. And I think that's the biggest piece here, is that people didn't know that our stakeholders in it. They live around it, they're the airport, the Conservation Commission. I think all those things were needed before, and to Alderman Dowd's point, a lot of other unanswered questions before we can really decide, when it comes to the board, what we're gonna do with it. So I just wanted to put the planning board perspective into it, because I did vote on it that night, and I did vote to pass it here. It was unanimous, I believe, to pass it here, so that's kind of where I was going with that. Thank you.
Yes, Alderman Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have 15 to 30 questions.
You might as well.
Just with everyone else here, it seems to be very important. Bit concerned, it seems like the property has no value unless we grant relief. You can't build on it. And if we didn't grant relief, what would be the point for the airport authority or FAA to want to buy it? Nothing changes. It would be stuck there, maybe to prevent something in the future. I'm just curious, was this bought in 2005? Is that what I heard?
2002, I believe.
And did the property owner know about all the steps that we need to go into building on that land at the time of the purchase?
That I don't know. I can say legally, you're generally presumed to know the land restrictions applicable to your land. That's just the law.
Follow up?
Why now? Why would the owner want to develop it now?
I think Mr. Goodspeed sort of gave at least an implicit answer to that. She's 80 years old. She's held it for this period of time, and it's just time for her to move on from just holding it for all this time. So that's why it's now.
Has there been any attempts to sell it without the variances or anything like that? And my question along this line is the value, right? Is it valued less to that property owner because no one wants to buy it with the restrictions? And then we grant relief, and then all of a sudden it has value again.
There has been an effort to sell it. Practically speaking, and I can let I'll confer with Mr. Goodspeed as he's been the realtor on it. But speaking from experience through law land use, most people want their approvals in place before they're going to buy it. It's just, nobody wants to put the money down, particularly in the residential setting without things being in place. And I think there has been interest, but at the same time, when you're still looking for approvals, the interest dwindles. I mean, that's just the reality of it. People don't want to say, yes, I'm going to put this money down and then I'm going to spend the next however months to a year trying to get the approval so I can use whatever I paid all this money for. So that practically speaking. So there has been interest, but nobody has purchased the property, obviously. It hasn't gone all the way through, but there has been interest.
One last statement. I just think it was a poor purchase to begin with, and I hope maybe even my colleague from Ward 1 would motion to table this for further consideration from all the concerns that we heard here today. I'd make that motion, but I'm not on this.
Yeah, well, let's not get ahead of the game. I think the intention of this, whether you support it or not support it, the thing is, I think if I can put the pulse of the victim that still has a pulse, this is not ready for prime time. It needs some work, needs some more negotiation. I have some questions. How long is in the example, how long is the driveway? Who's going to be responsible? How are we going to get a fire truck up to that particular driveway? Is there adequate water supply for hydrants in that area? Who's going to supply that? Us or Penachuk? Looking at it, there's a significant lay to get water into that particular area. So there's a lot of unanswered questions that may come out of this. So the thing is, perhaps maybe the motion in the future to table might be in order. But the thing is to give the opportunity to come up. And I would like Mr. Mueller in the particulars to leave this meeting educated with an understanding of some of our concerns. And if it's going to come, we'll try to reach that particular goal. If they choose to continue to invest, consider this a good investment. So that's what I would like. Director Sullivan.
Mr. Chair, I think you took some of the words out of my mouth. This petitioner, my statement is neither an endorsement nor a statement against the petition, but this petitioner has worked diligently over the last 2 years to at least pursue a path towards this event tonight and the consideration of this. And so I think out of fairness to Mr. Goodspeed, Attorney Muller, and Ms. Adams, and I think the committee is headed in this direction, any feedback that you can provide us as staff to at least seek clarification on specific items that are being proposed or questions that you have, we greatly appreciate that. And I think we're hearing safety and security, some level of engagement from the FAA, confirmation of service availability for any infrastructure. I do think we've addressed many of the fire access questions, and the reality is the access can be upgraded to the extent that safe fire access can be provided to the property. But speaking for myself, I want to ensure that when I leave this meeting and I'm working with Attorney Muller, that I have clear guidance as to what items additional information is needed on. That's not to say that the petition will be favorably recommended, but if there are additional pieces of information, I very much appreciate the committee's guidance on what that might be.
Director Sullivan, you're writing this down, I hope.
Some of it, yes.
Some of the recommendations.
Yeah, I am.
So if I may influence as chair, the new direction, the tone of this meeting, if you have some input on what you would like to see going forward with this particular project that hasn't been yet discussed, to give Director Sullivan and Attorney Mueller, a goal to see if they can achieve that. So, yes, Alderman Como.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Along those lines, if we were going to take a pause and allow for the opportunity to collect some more information, some of the concerns that I have, which have already been mentioned, the security of the airport, the maintenance of the road, and the impact on the surrounding conservation land, as well as the lack of notice to the abutters. I realize, we got the explanation that we're not required to notify the abutters, but maybe we should. Something like this happens in a neighborhood, I think it'd be a good thing to let them know. So if we could get some clarification on those items the next time we meet, I would appreciate that.
Okay. Did I have another hand? Okay, because I do have Attorney Mueller would like to speak, but Alderman Tebow, please.
Yeah, thank you. It's a question through you, Mr. Chairman, to Director Sullivan. When this goes to the Board of Aldermen, is that the last place it goes? It doesn't go back to planning or zoning or anywhere else? That's where it ends?
Mr. Chair, to Alderman Tebow's question, the remaining step would actually be a building permit application to the Building Safety Department. But based on what we know now, that would be the last step. The one caveat I would add there is that we have some understanding of the construction needed to build the road. And certainly Keach Nordstrom has produced a design that's been included within the packet this evening. And I know there's been representations about wetlands where, I can't say I agree with the representations or not, but there may be some permitting associated with wetlands impacts. We just don't know at this point in time. What I can say with some confidence is, to my knowledge, the alderman would not be involved in any further decision-making beyond, the granting of an approval or the denial.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Attorney Mueller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to clarify one issue that was with respect to the notice, at least as it concerns tonight. As I indicated earlier, I do a lot of land use. And the issue of notice, even where it's required by statute, particularly in the variance context, has come up before. In particular, there's a case called 10 out of Manchester where somebody literally did not get a notice at all. They were just skipped. They appeared at the hearing. They then complained about the lack of notice, went all the way up to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court, this is just to keep this in mind for future purposes, basically said that if you appear at the hearing, there's no prejudice to the lack of notice, and therefore the issue basically goes away. And that, as I said, is in a case where by statute you have to provide a butter notice under state law. So that was the only sort of clarification I wanted to add, at least with regard to tonight.
Okay. Are you withholding a motion, Alderman Gouveia, at this time? I do have two aldermen that have raised their hands to speak. Would you be so gracious? Thank you. Alderman Jettie.
Thank you. So on the point of notice, I just, I know the people are here tonight, but my understanding is they weren't at the planning board meeting, where if they would have had the opportunity to express their concerns to the planning board, the planning board may have voted differently. But am I wrong about that?
There is no abutter notice provision for the planning board hearing. So that's apparently in the city of Nashua, if I understand Director Williams correctly, there has been at least a practice or policy where this board or the Board of Mayor and Aldermen conduct public hearings for these types of petitions. It's not required by statute. The statute basically says the governing body votes after getting a recommendation from the planning board. There is no public hearing requirement at the planning board, so you wouldn't have the abutter notice there. I would also note, however, there was a reference to it earlier, not by myself, but one of those in opposition. This did go to the Zoning Board of Adjustment for a frontage variance back in 2021, September. There is public notice for that. Butters do get notice for that hearing. That went, it was eventually granted, there are no appeals, no complaints about notice to my knowledge for that. So there has been, at least with regard to the project in general, an opportunity after notice to abutters to make comments. And there were comments. There was that, my memory was, originally got denied, went to rehearing, and got granted after rehearing. So there was obviously opposition there, and people were listened to at that stage.
Okay, well, that's good to know. And so if I could just, one last thing. So, asking for feedback, I guess my own feeling is that, I would hope that Ms. Adams would be able to find some way to get the benefit of her purchase, and perhaps perhaps the best way to do that would be, I think I heard you say that she would be that she would entertain an offer from the city or the airport authority as far as if they wanted to purchase it. So perhaps I guess that would if somehow a deal could be made where she could get the benefit of selling it, and the airport authority could get it so that it doesn't interfere with anything, and it would take us off our table. I guess that would be that would be my choice. But
To be clear, I did say I don't believe she would not entertain any offers from anybody. If anyone came in, obviously it would have to make sense for her, but I don't know of any reason why she wouldn't at least entertain discussions with either the airport authority, the city, or whoever else had an interest in the property. Obviously, in response to your colleague's question, she has put it on the market before, has received offers, but not offers, but there was some discussion that didn't go anywhere because of approval issues, among other things. But as I said, if people would like to speak to her, I can direct them to her realtor and they can go through him.
thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Alderman Dow.
Yeah, I know we're looking for questions before my colleague makes a motion. One thing I would definitely want to see is I would want to make sure that the airport authority contacts the FAA just to see what their feeling is. I believe this would be an R9 septic. There's no sewerage out there.
Subject to confirmation, I just need to confirm.
So we don't know the answer to that. And it would also be the purchaser's requirement to run gas and if necessary sewer and water lines to the property at their expense. The other thing I'd like to know is I want to go out to the airport with the airport manager and look and see where the fence and the gates are today. It's been a long time since I've walked out that part. To see what fencing would cost. Based on where the fencing might have to go, it could be cheaper to buy the property. So that's one thing to look at. And I would also look at developing legislation if we allow the property to discontinue that road from the edge of that property all the way to Amber Street. Any part that's not discontinued already. That road was originally constructed because, as I said, an airport requirement. And it wasn't really intended to be a road. The fire department was geared to use it, and that's why there's a gated fence near the beginning of those hangars, and the other one at Amber Street, but they never wanted to use it because the road's not in great shape, and they don't like those fences that are there. Trust me, we've been through the fence thing with the fire department extensively. So, just questions that I have. I don't know where the fences end up, where the fences could go, but you notice all your airports today, especially with the type of traffic we now have at this airport, to safeguard many aspects of the airport. There's a lot of aircraft maneuvering around, and all those hangars you see there in that paved area, none of that was there when I was the airport manager. That's all new, or relatively new. I don't know what year that was put in, but so there's people work on their aircraft in those hangars, and they run them up and make noise. And from what I can see, it looks like there's not a lot of coverage between those hangars and that property. So I'm just thinking, somebody buys and wants to build there, they're gonna have a lot of noise all the time. But again, I wanna see what the FAA has to say and make sure we have answers to all our questions, and if we approve this, that we have all our ducks in a row, the things that need to be done to make it safe and equitable to the airport.
Okay, thank you, Alderman Dowd. Attorney Miller, Director Sullivan. Before I introduce our next speaker, would be Alderman GOV. Did we give you enough information, something to work with here? Are you still looking for anything else that can assist you off this board while we're here?
I think I understand the basic questions. One is just generally the airport security and safety question, dealing with the road and basically access to what is still Deerwood Drive. There is a question or a concern relative to noise. We talked about the notice issue. I think you're looking for a little bit more detail about the recommendations from the engineering department and the fire department in terms of what we agreed we would do. There are some basic questions about the development of the lot in terms of septic and things of that nature. I also heard basically an issue that was raised by, I believe, the chairman of the Conservation Commission before the planning board about protecting the wetlands restrictions. I'll be a little bit more specific about that, and I believe that more or less covers, or what I understand are to be the issues. The only other one, I think I have to do a better job of explaining it, is there's been some questions about who's responsible for the maintenance of essentially the access way. I can answer that now. It will be the homeowner. That's what you had to put that notice on record for, because by law, you have to do it. It still is a public way, but the maintenance and making sure that the fire department can get there and things of that nature, that falls on whoever owns that lot.
Okay, Director Sullivan, same question.
I would agree with Attorney Muller. I feel as though we have guidance to at least continue the discussions between Attorney Muller's client and my office, the engineering department and fire department, and other utility entities as appropriate, and certainly Mr. Lynch and the airport authority. I expect we'll be able to return to you in fairly short order with answers to some of these questions, and so we'd be happy to work with a tabling motion to come back to this body and have a further discussion at a future meeting.
Yeah, and I would like to give the usual caveats. This board here is willing to work with you, Attorney Mueller, but you're gonna have to put a little bit more, work on this, but still no guarantee, you know what I mean? Still gotta appear back to us. I just want you to understand that.
Oh, I understand that fully.
Okay.
It's one of those things that one I do get.
Okay, then our work here is done, and I recognize Alderman Gouveia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've been withholding my comments. This is my ward, the area I represent. So I've been kind of knee deep in this for the past few weeks now, and hearing from my constituents who are here in the gallery today, it's pretty loud and clear what I'm hearing. And as it stands right now, I would not support the petition as is for multiple different reasons, including that I think there's a lot of unanswered questions here. And I also think, as stated by one of our speakers in the public hearing, is when they moved in, they were told nothing else would go up around them. People moved into Ward 1 for the feel of what Ward 1 is, which is not downtown. You're still in the city. You have the accessibility of the city. You have the services of the city, but not so much of that very clustered city feel. And that's why I moved out into Ward 1, was for that exact reason. And I feel that is a point that I really want to drive home here, is that the neighborhood doesn't seem to really want this. And I haven't heard too much testimony in support from anybody other than the developers, which is honestly expected. I don't expect many people to come out and say, I think this is a good development. I think there's just a lot of unanswered questions. A Class 6 road, I think, opens up a lot more questions. And I think that's something to dive deeper in. I have a strange amount of experience with Class 6 roads. My in-laws own a camp up in Ellsworth, New Hampshire that's on a Class 6 road, and I can tell you at times it's an absolute mess. It's an absolute mess, and that's only a town of 65. So I can imagine it in a city. It's not going to make it too much harder, and I have concerns of what that Class 6 road opens up into, and there could be a lot of riffraff that could go on in there, and that's not what the neighborhood's gonna want. They want to, in my opinion, and what I've been hearing, is they want to just be left alone. Life is good right now up in that area, and I don't think they're ready or want for change. So going forward, I think we have a lot of questions to ask. I know Director Sullivan kind of gave his opinion and the opinion of his division, which I think is absolutely reasonable. The one question I still do have here is the Development Council aware of, of the questions that were submitted in the communication by Mrs. Harden?
I have seen that letter.
You have seen it? Okay.
Yes.
And is there a way we could get responses to some of those questions?
Some of those questions, yeah, I mean, as I said, a lot of those are...
Of course, are addressed, yes.
Yes, but in some of those, I think, such as the notice issue, is a little bit beyond...
Of course, yep.
My thing, but I understand that there are concerns of that were raised in that letter. I have a copy of it. We
Okay.
can get something.
Perfect. Yeah, if we get some more answers based on just the questions that you have the ability to answer, I think that would definitely be helpful in the decision-making process. And as we said, I think we're awaiting some airport documents that can come in tomorrow. So I think there's just a lot left to go on here. But as of right now, it's a very tough sell on me in the ward. So hearing from the constituents, it's a hard sell for me.
Okay. Alderman Gouveia, do you recognize for a motion?
Yes, I motion the table.
Okay. We have a motion to table, which is a high motion, non-debatable. Will the clerk? No, we don't have to call for a roll. We're not, nobody's on Zoom. Yeah. Okay, all those in favor for tabling signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And
Thank you very
Attorney
much, Mr.
Miller, I
Chairman.
thank you for your attendance, and thank you, Director Sullivan, for your input. Okay, Director Cummings we have just one item, which is loss of Maples Park, but do you want to go next?
I'd be happy to, Mr. Chairman, but I'm actually going to be deferring to our new Economic Development Director, Director Hannum, who's here this evening. Of course, I will be in the audience to support her, and I believe Director Sullivan's going to be sticking around as well. So if it pleases the chair, I'd like to hand this off to Director Hannum.
Okay, and Director Hannum, please welcome to the Horseshoe. You may come up. You can sit next to Alderman Dowd. He will not bite you, I guarantee.
That's not true. Be careful.
I'll
watch out.
Tim already cleared the audience.
Okay, thank you for joining us. Alderman Timmons, yes.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to amend renaming the park to Reverend Doc.
Well, excuse me, Alderman Timmons. I asked, we do have people here for a better presentation. Yeah, okay. I mean, and I would entertain that motion.
Okay.
Okay, and what we'll do with that, first we'll make the motion to pass, and then you may, amend the affirmative. Okay? All right, very good. Director Hannum, welcome.
Liz Hannum, Economic Development Director, for the record. We've invited the chair and representative from, vice chair from the BIDA agency, authority. I'm learning.
You're doing a fine job. Would you like to come forward and sit in the Horseshoe? These are no longer the cheap seats.
The upgrade in seating, welcome.
Well, it saves you from stretching your back, I noticed during the meeting.
So we just wanted to reintroduce BIDA to the Infrastructure Committee, and I'll hand it over to them.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm Jason Haviland. I'm the chairman of the committee. I was here several years ago with Jack Tully.
Excuse me. Did Alderman Moore leave? Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. All right.
I just was there for the petition.
Okay, thank you, Alderman Moore.
I was here several years ago with Jack Tully, talking about the Bridge Street project. And we have another project underway. And we thought it would be helpful to do two things. One, just come by and let you guys ask some questions of us, who we are, what we do. I do have 2 slides that I'm happy to share. I don't know what the protocol is, how much time we have, what you want to do, but we can share who we are and what we do.
Did you have the thumb drive?
I actually, Alex, I sent it to you in email. Is that, that's not going to work?
Can't pull that up
Okay,
on here.
then we can just talk. Or I have, actually I have enough copies. Is it okay to pass something
Yeah,
out, or is that?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
You could get email, but...
All right, so I guess before I just jump in, is there anything anybody wants to make sure I know or ask before I just start talking?
No, why don't you go through your presentation?
I'll be brief.
You have introduced yourself. But give us an overview, because sitting at home is John Q. Public, and they may not be familiar with BIDA.
Sure.
So here's your opportunity for the song.
Okay, so I'll be brief. I'll tell a little bit about what we do, and then a little bit about our next project. And part of what we also wanted to do is discuss a little bit about our approach for how we would do that, and just get your input and ideas about that as well. All right, so we are the Nashua Business, actually, let me also introduce Lydia Foley, the vice chairwoman of our committee. So we are the Nashua Business and Industrial Development Authority, BIDA for short. Here's our current committee, so it's myself, Lydia's the vice chairwoman, and then Mark Perlman, Carl Andre, David Dennehy, Scott McKnight, Jaren Slattery, Deb Novotny, and then we currently have an open position that's recently vacated by John Stabile. So this is our volunteer, but appointed by the mayor board. We also have representation from the city treasurer and from two of your fellow aldermen. And what's our mission statement? What do we do? Why do we exist? So we are Nashua area residents in coordination with the city. Volunteering is in bold because I like to point this out to people who come to our meeting and complain. We're here to donate our time and energy to support the continued growth and business development of Nashua through the evaluation, consultation, and facilitation of business development opportunities and through the redevelopment of unproductive and underutilized real estate. Basically, we take the stuff, again now, in fairness, we've done one project in, well, like 12 or 15 years. We're hoping to accelerate the pace of that. So we have our second one lined up. But we're trying to help, right? We're trying to help take the unutilized and underproductive stuff and help the city move that forward back onto the tax roll and generally just make Nashua a more developer-friendly city. That's who we are, that's why we exist. And so what do? Page 2. We basically do 4 things. So we try to build public-private partnerships like we did with the Bridge Street project. So we worked on many of probably the same things this group does, other departments in the city. We help zoning changes come into effect. We help with environmental studies. We found a developer for the Bridge Street project. We facilitated the review of that project and helped just make it took 12, 15 years, so we can't argue it went smoothly, but we did have constant communication and constant oversight with that partnership. We're financial stewards, right? So we look over the costs, we review what's happening, we review the project process. In the case of the Bridge Street project specifically, it went from no revenue to $680,000 a year back on the tax rolls. And if you sort of add that up, since it's been on the tax rolls to now, you're at 2.3 million since it came on. So we're very proud of that. We do like I said, we do oversight. We meet monthly. We got budget oversight. I was here with Chairman Tully talking about the specifics of the deal last time we were here, why we sold it for the price we did and what were the economics around that. So we help review that as well as every other key aspect of the project. And then we try to provide business leadership. We have realtors, but we also have a nice cross-section of Nashua residents serving on this board, all with different perspectives, different ideas, trying to just bring our best ideas forward and help Nashua become, the most, or increase the attractiveness for development in Nashua. And on the very bottom of that slide is the statute for which we are authorized. So that's us in a nutshell. Questions on that?
Open up for questions. Alderman Timmons.
Thank you. I have 2 questions. One, you say you guys are all volunteers?
That's correct.
Is that full-time or part-time?
Part-time.
Part-time, I was wondering, I was like, wait, okay.
Yes, we meet once a month.
Oh, okay.
And then we typically take action items of some sort to do various things. We take tours of properties. In the past, we helped organize and run a developer tour where we got on a city bus and took the bus around the city and allowed the developers to see the kind of the best and brightest ideas that they might be interested in seeing in the city. We attend meetings, talk to developers. Eventually, we'll talk to abutters on the property we're talking about. So we have some activity outside, to the order of like several hours a month.
May I?
Follow up?
Yes. Secondly, what is the next project?
Well, so that's kind of the next agenda item. If we're ready to move on to that, we can do that next, or again, I'll field any other questions about who we are and what we're up to.
Well, any initial questions? If not, we can move on to the next page too.
All right, well.
There you go. Oh.
Huh?
Alderman Jettie has a question.
Oh, Alderman Jettie, I'm sorry, I didn't see you, sir.
Yes, but I can wait. I can wait and ask my question afterwards.
It's up to you. Okay.
All right, so we are working on the project that we describe as the police training facility in the mill yard. And it has come, through, through city consultations that might be a good property for us to work on next. And it is our hope that, we take on projects like this and sort of get them to a place where a developer wants to come in, buy it, and fully develop the project. In this particular case, we are taking the proceeds from the Bridge Street project and rolling them forward into the early work on this project to, again, I think the environmental study is complete. I don't know, is that true? Or
It is very close to being.
very close to being complete. And I'll invite Director Sullivan up as well. Certainly welcome to come up and add more things that are of interest rather than my color commentary on them. But it's our intent to get the project past the point where, as in like the last presentation you were looking at, where there was risk, right? We want to try to take that risk out, get it to the place where a developer comes in, knows what's there, and can build it. And, they'll have certainly some input, we'll have some input. Lady and I met with the mayor last week. I think it was last week, yep. Got some of his input. And so we'll consolidate all of that. And eventually our hope would be to get a resolution from the Board of Aldermen, similar, almost, in many ways to the resolution that was passed for Bridge Street, to basically convey the property to us for the purposes of building it and developing.
Any questions from members of the board? Alderman Jettie.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you, Mr. Haviland and Ms. Foley, for coming. We understand what it's like to be volunteers because we are essentially volunteers ourselves. Almost all of us have other full-time jobs, and so we know what it's like to do that, and also to spend time on city business. And it's good to see you in person because it's always better, when you're just dealing with names, projects and stuff that come before us. It's nice to be able to know the people behind it. So I've, it's suddenly dawned on me. I mean, I've always thought, the Business and Industrial Development Authority, I kind of think of it like it's the Boston Redevelopment Authority.
Yes.
I think of this.
It could be that, but we're not. We're not there yet. We're
Right.
going to take some baby steps before we do that.
And so I've expressed, kind of a disappointment, not knowing any better, that, we haven't had more projects coming from you. And, the project that you did on Bridge Street, was very successful, but it was essentially housing. And what you're talking about in the mill yard is more housing.
Correct.
I'm kind of looking for, somebody last night mentioned IKEA, coming here, or, the development. Someone else spoke very favorably about the development in Salem, Tuscan Village. I think, if I got the name correct. I don't know. Tesla. Some big company coming in. And we've got a lot of mill buildings.
Yeah.
Somebody coming in, with employing a lot of people and, you understand.
Doing the
what
big
I'm
stuff,
talking
yeah,
about.
for
So-
sure.
So, I realize that, your time is limited, your resources are limited, and, maybe it's our economic development director who would play that role better, with your assistance, but.
Yeah, certainly we can and we would like to play a role in doing all of those things, right? And we would like to, I don't think we want to be the Boston Redevelopment Authority, but we would like to do more than one project every 12 years, right? Like we'd like a little bit more of a pace, right? We can probably handle a couple at a time, right? And I guess I'll leave it to, if Director Cummings or Sullivan would like to weigh in on the value of our board and sort of what we bring and we think we do a good job and we think we could play a role in helping the city in those regards. And at some point, if we could build some budget, build some capacity, do a couple of these projects, we're not probably well known, you're the alderman, you didn't even know about it, right? So we got some work to do to try to be a little bit more well known, but possibly all of those things could happen. And yeah, we'd very much like to do more than our previous pace.
Thank you.
Further questions, Alderman Tebow?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess this question is more like how you guys look at things. So, there's not empty buildings on every corner, but there are some empty buildings out there. I think
Yes.
Amazon we're supposed to do Amazon Fresh, and then now the building's just sitting there, and Daniel Webster Highway, the building 19 building's been there forever. I mean, that's a big building.
Right.
Could you develop that? That would be a
Yeah.
giant thing. It's just sitting there. So I look at a lot of those empty buildings and I think, before it was like, is Director Cummings doing something about this or not? But now, if, you guys could get involved in some of these things. And so this is like a city property. Can you get involved in properties that aren't owned by the city?
Yes, we can. And we, surprisingly have the authority to raise bonds. And that could be an interesting mechanism where it might not, where the bullets can be directed in another area if something like that were to come along and have any consternation. Yes, that's a possibility. We actually have significant amount of authority well beyond what we've exercised or used. Again, the budget, we actually looked at a couple of individual, so our budget coming off of Bridge Street was $250,000. All right, what could we buy for $250? And then roll forward from there. We looked at a couple and we said, yeah, no, we don't want to do like a tiny one. Let's invest in a bigger one, have that sell for more. And then again, with the intent being, let's continue to roll the projects forward. So yeah, those are all things that we could engage with and do.
Do it. Let's do it.
Yeah.
I'm waiting. Thanks. Good luck.
Can I just add?
Please,
Mr.
Lydia.
Chairman.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the process currently is, we look to the Economic Development Director to identify underutilized property and help determine the higher and best use. So the talented people on BIDA, we look at different projects, we pull up the GIS map like we're seeing here, and for the most part, we are looking at city-owned property. The public-private partnership is a little bit more cumbersome, so these projects that the city already owns is what we have experience with so far, but certainly we could look at a proactive approach engaging with private owners.
Okay. Right. We're still, like I said, we probably have to do some smaller, bite-sized chunks, and then we could look for something bigger. But there's also other ways that we could, we are, I feel like in some ways we're a little bit of an underutilized asset. There's some real highly talented people on this board with wonderful business insights. John Stabile just resigned, but there's an amazing wealth of knowledge in his head at the board, and just so much insight and both practical and nostalgic knowledge about Nashua. And again, we're all there because we want to be, right? we can all resign, like, I'm sure you guys can resign, or like, we're just trying to help, right? And so, you know, everyone on the board is very willing to, you know, talk about ideas and projects that we might help with any way we can.
Okay, Director Ham, I do have something for you. Is this committee familiar with the work that is currently going on through PEDC with the overlay up at the Amherst Street area and stuff like that, which would seem to be groundbreaking opportunities? If you're looking for that bigger fish in the pond, I can tell you the right hole he's in, you know what I mean? But that's an area that is, could use some TLC and monitoring.
We haven't done a kind of comprehensive rundown of what's happening, but that's certainly something we could add to the agenda to the beginning of those meetings. I think that would be really helpful, and we've talked about it just in the 2 meetings that I've been at as well. So I think that that's something that we can start working on.
Yeah, and then also too, I am so pleased that you came before this committee, but there's always been a little bit of overlap. And I know you're relatively new, and Director Cummings and Director Sullivan can verify between PEDC and infrastructure. You know, our goals are common, you know, and unfortunately Alderman Moran, and that's why I try to say you're in a seat, but he is the chairman of PEDC.
What does that stand for? I'm sorry.
You had to ask that. Planning and Economic Development Committee. And just by that title, I think you could see why.
Yeah.
You know, because that seems to be fit right within my opinion, equally as well as us, but equally as well with your focus and stuff like that. But unfortunately, he had to leave, so, you know, I'm sure he would have extended the invitation to discuss that. So maybe moving down farther down the line, you know, please don't take all our summer nights, but, you know, we are volunteers since that was brought up, but, you know.
Yeah, I will say just in the 2 meetings that I've attended, I'm really excited. There's a lot of really ambitious people, and these kinds of projects are well within their scope of work and their ability. So I'm pretty excited to have a really great support system going forward.
Yeah, because as we go on in the future, Director Cummings will probably throw a shoe at me, so will Director Sullivan. But I'm hoping, as the objective of the Infrastructure Committee, as we march on, I mean, we have some infrastructure that we're definitely going to need to take it a peek see at and to come up with some solutions and stuff like that. So very shortly, I would imagine our plate will start getting full, you know. We're great at building, we're not so great at maintaining. We're going to change that.
Yeah.
You know, even the house has to be painted every 7 years, unless you go vinyl and it's vinyl, you know.
That advertisements working.
No, not at all.
Times for
Not at all, you know. Any other questions by members of the board? Alderman Jettie.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I did want to acknowledge, you know, in my comments, I didn't mean in any way to forget the great efforts that Director Cummings has made. I mean, he has brought, you know, there are companies that have come to Nashua under his, you know, his work, and I didn't want him to think that I've forgotten about those things. I can't remember all of them, but
I'll work on
yes,
IKEA.
You know, it's not like he's done nothing, so.
Yeah, I will also add that, you know, as a several hours a month board, like we can't do what we do without support from the city staff, and they're fantastic. They work with us very closely. Again, I think we help them. They certainly help and drive the on-the-ground activity that helps or that moves on our committee. So, yeah, that partnership is great, and we look forward to more of it.
Okay, other questions, members of the board? Director Sullivan.
I have to make just one comment.
Please.
because I can't shut my mouth. I can't help myself.
Stop volunteering for things.
Well, no. You did say that the other night, too.
I've said it like 3 nights in a row.
I can't help
hope
myself.
This isn't to shoot to the chair.
Oh, no, Matt Sullivan, Community Development Director. I want to first start by giving credit to Jason, Lydia, and the committee. They've pushed planning staff significantly to tweak some existing processes that are really focused on development applications. And John Stabile, who is, I guess, late in the sense that he's no longer on the committee, but had very vocally expressed some frustration with the way that processes were working in the city, and he was right. And so we've made some small tweaks that we hope will make a big impact, and I just want to give them credit for that. And although they weren't intimately involved with the mixed-use overlay, they will be intimately involved with the land use code update moving forward. That's something we've been talking actively about, and they're really going to be a significant voice from an economic development perspective on that, adding to Director Hannum's conversation that she'll have with our planning team. I do just want to mention 2 very brief things about this exciting project that BITA is bringing forward. One is that I know there's been some very deliberate discussion at this committee about sort of the revenue split and how that arrangement will work moving forward. And I want to say for the record tonight, I don't want to get through this meeting without saying this, that we're actively talking about how that will play out, and it will be part of the resolution that's brought to you at a later point in time. But any representations made to date are still sort of currently under negotiation and discussion. And so I know Director Cummings had come to this group several months ago and had some discussions about this, and we're now taking a closer look at all of those numbers. And so although there's certainly some conversation on the record, you might see some new information presented moving forward. The other piece that I want to point out, and it's not clearly within the boundaries of the project, but there is a parcel to the north that's a large city parking lot. It's not actually included within the contemplation of what BITA is working on directly right now. It's the parcel to the left. But this is something that, as part of the environmental work, we're actually taking a look at, just to understand what, if any, environmental conditions might exist here. And I guess I'll make the controversial comment here. This is possibly a future redevelopment opportunity as well. It's currently a surface parking lot. We know that parking is needed here, and this is not within the scope of the BITA project today. But this is an opportunity with all of the mixed use and residential redevelopment opportunity within the mill yard. This is something you may see BITA look at in the future, or certainly something that will be contemplated in the work that they're doing. I just wanted to quickly say that to this committee so it's on your radar. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Sullivan. Again, further questions, members of the board? Well, I would like to thank you for coming in, give us a presentation. This is my first opportunity to meet you, and so I thank you for coming in so the other members of the board can meet you. Yes, do you have a comment?
Jason, when's the next meeting? In case anybody wants to.
Excellent question. July 21st. Third Friday of the month.
9 a.m. Yes.
21st, yeah.
21st.
Thank you.
Okay. And where?
Upstairs.
In the auditorium.
They don't
July
put us on
21st
TV at 9 in the
and
morning.
9 a.m.
9 a.m. upstairs auditorium.
Sometimes
Be there
on,
or be square.
sometimes on Zoom.
Sometimes on Zoom, yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Thank you again for the invite. Appreciate it.
Mr. Chairman, I'm gonna go, I get that procedure in the morning.
Oh, come on, you're not gonna tough it out with us? Alderman Dowd, thank you for your attendance and your input tonight. Thank you.
Good luck.
See ya.
Okay, final thing on the agenda tonight. I'll let the clerk read the title, please.
So before us is R23-130, renaming Los Amigos Park to Reverend Dr. Perkins Los Amigos Park. I'd like to make a motion to recommend final passage.
Okay, it seems Alderman Timmons does have a pending amendment that she would like to put into this. Would you, Alderman Como, would you work with Alderman Timmons on the?
Yes, I write very slow, so
Okay,
bear with me.
there you go. And I'll give it to you. It's renaming the park to Reverend Dr. Bertha A. Perkins Los Amigos Park. And here it is.
So basically, the change would be to put the first name involved, correct? Yes, okay.
There you go.
Yeah.
Okay, open up discussion on the amendment, which is basically putting the name Bertha to the Reverend Dr. Bertha Perkins, Lawson.
A. Perkins.
A. Perkins, excuse me, on the amendment. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. All right, before us is R23-130 as amended, and with the pending motion of ought to pass. Any discussion on the motion? Alderman Jettie.
Yes, thank you. So, I'm in favor of recognizing, the Reverend Dr. Bertha A. Perkins. This is sponsored, or I think originally sponsored by Alderman Lopez, and it's his ward, and he's doing great work there, and I will support whatever he wants. But the thought occurred to me that, the question I had, isn't there, some other way of honoring Dr. Perkins other than renaming the park? Only because, the Reverend Dr. Bertha A. Perkins Los Amigos Park is not only a mouthful, it's going to be very difficult to put that on a sign. And I suspect that, after we do this, and the sentiment of honoring Dr. Perkins, I'm fully in favor of. I just wish there was some other way, some other thing that we could name after her, because I suspect that after we do this, it's either still going to be called Amigos Park, or maybe it'll be changed to Perkins Park. But I guarantee you, hardly anybody is ever going to call it the Reverend Dr. Bertha A. Perkins Los Amigos Park. And, I had a similar thought when we renamed the Broad Street Parkway to the Veterans Memorial Parkway. I knew that the memorial part was going to get dropped, and that the people are going to call it the Veterans Parkway in short order. And so if that's what if that's what the neighborhood wants, and that's what that's fine with me. I just raised that issue as to whether or not there'd be something else, near the church that would be, better suited to honoring her. But I just had that. I don't know if you thought about that or have an answer to that. I don't know.
May I?
Yes, you may.
One, it's not about the church, it's about the community, the entire community. And as far as the parkway, I call it the shortcut. So no matter what you name something, somebody's always going to shorten that name. So that's a moot point to me. But to shorten that would be slapping those people in the face. So, and that's why it's that long. I get it. It's a lot, and nobody is going to say that. But it's the symbolic motion behind it more than the name itself. That community really care a lot about her, and she did a lot for the community. I mean, I've seen her, I would bypass her and give her a $20 bill, and this person was walking by and she hands that $20 bill over to that particular person. So it's more than just the church. It's what she does, what she was doing for the entire community and the church and the city and the state itself. And she's instrumental of passing the Martin Luther King Jr. holiday as well. I mean, she did a lot for this state.
Could I follow up?
Follow up?
Yeah. I don't dispute the contribution that she has made and that she's very deserving of an honor. I just, you know, I just, that long name on a park that's already got a name. I'm just wondering if there's something else that, you know, that we couldn't come up with, but
Yeah.
I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Jettie. Alderman Tebow.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Man, I'm agreeing with Alderman Jettie a lot lately. I mean, I agree 100% that she deserves something. I think it's some of the other parks in the city, Drescher Park, Libby Park, Domenico Park. They don't use like the full name of the person. And so, I mean, I'm probably going to vote for this no matter what, because I think it's probably the right thing. But that is it will probably be the longest name of any park in the city. I don't even know who Greeley. I don't even know the name. It's not Horace Greeley, but I don't know who was it. James Greeley? I don't even know, right? Because we go by Greeley Park. So,
Well, they willed it to the city, yeah.
you know, like I said, I would still vote for this, but it is a mouthful. Wow.
It is.
Alderman Coleman.
Yes, thank you. I have no problem with the ordinance or the amendment. I'm ashamed of myself as a clerk for not catching this, but Alderwoman Timmons isn't on the committee, so she can't make a motion. So I will retroactively say that I made the motion on her behalf.
Well, that's why, for clarification.
That's why we got you up there.
I had written motion by Alderwoman Timmons, and I was like, wait a second. So I just wanted to make sure I say that out loud.
No, you were supposed to, that's why I asked you to
Yes.
work with her
Got
on
it.
the amendment. That was my point of.
I have a lot of scribbles on this paper today.
Well, that's why we pay you, you know.
Pay you the big bucks.
That's right.
You know. Okay. I think what it comes down to, there are infinitesimal ways that you could honor people in the city, and maybe not, people would agree in the concept, but probably have a better idea. I know in Somerville, Mass, they have a fire station of 3 firefighters who were killed, and that's a mouthful. But it's in a certain square, and that's what the people called, you know what I mean, because it's the neighborhood. But the thing is, she will get a plaque that will be outside the facility. And if not, in my opinion, is what we're in search for, is that brief moment somebody that might read that particular plaque and reflect back and think about that. Maybe we achieved our goal. So everybody here, their points are well taken, but the thing is there a clean way that makes everybody happy? I don't know, you know. But any other further comment by members of the board? Okay, seeing none, I'll call for the vote of R23-130, so amended by Alderman Como at the suggestion of Alderman Timmons. You know.
Perfect.
That works, okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. In case anybody's wondering why I'm standing up, the back is bothering me right now. Yeah. New business ordinances,
There are none.
tabled in committee.
There is none.
General discussion? Okay. Public comment? Everybody has vacated the premises, so. And remarks by Alderman. Well, I personally would like to say thank you. We had a very tough discussion. I think everybody was very good and brought up points of view. But, and I'd like to compliment you all. I mean, my goal was to give the city director Sullivan and Attorney Miller direction on what to go by. And then they'll come back to us. And then we could weigh the balance and have better information. But when you have like unanswered type of questions, it's not the way. And it referred back to my time up at the State House. If a bill isn't ready for prime time, then you reject it, because then it's not a good bill. And this wasn't 100% clean. So I thank you all for your due diligence of working on that. Hopefully we'll have something a lot cleaner coming back shortly that we could take a look at. Okay, my next favored motion. Alderman Como?
Don't get ahead of yourself. I
Okay.
have to make another one first. Can I make a motion to accept and place on file the communication we received from the
Yes,
chairman of the
please,
Business and
please.
Development Authority?
Without objection, or anybody want to vote? Without objection.
Perfect. And then I would like to move to adjourn.
Okay, motion to adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We're adjourned at 9:11. Thank you all again.